So, welcome to another episode of Unpopular Opinion. Now, did you know that you're focusing on the wrong dynamic range? What do I mean by that? If you see the internet, YouTube, everybody's talking about, even camera manufacturers and photographers are talking about the dynamic range of the camera, the sensor, right? Uh, 12 stops, 14 stops, 15 stops, and whatnot. And there are comparisons, endless comparisons on how much dynamic range does the sensor have. Well, that's the wrong dynamic range to focus on. What you need to start focusing on is the dynamic range that exists in the scene you're shooting, right? That's what photographers do. That's what good photographers do. They don't go out in um, midday harsh sunlight, high contrast lighting situations and try to get the highlight details and the shadow details. That's not going to happen unless you use some kind of compensatory lighting and filters and all that stuff. So you obviously need to learn how to use filters, graduated filters, to cut off light where you don't need it, where it's kind of where there are highlights, and then exposed for the shadows and all that. But that apart, the point is that you need to go out and shoot when the dynamic range, or select scenes where the dynamic range does not exceed the dynamic range of your camera, and it doesn't matter what camera you have. So even if you have a camera which is 15 years old with very less dynamic range, like CCD for example, CCD sensors before CMOS came had very narrow dynamic range, and I have one sitting at home, which is the Leica monochrome, which I use very often. So the easiest way to shoot with that, or rather the right way to shoot with that, is actually shoot frames where there are not where you don't have extreme highlights and extreme shadows in the same frame. So you got to look for frames like that. You need to understand lighting in a given situation. You need to be able to understand how much is the variation, what is the range, what is the dynamic range in the scene, and should I expose for the shadows? Should I expose for highlights? What do I want in detail? That's what you need to focus on. So stop thinking about dynamic range of your sensors. Once you shoot 10 images in different lighting conditions, you'll know what is the acceptable dynamic range of your camera. Once you know that, it's absolutely and only in your hands to go out and shoot the right scenes. So stop focusing on dynamic range of cameras. Is just a waste of time. Thank you.